Welcome to another episode of Policy and Profits. I am Anthony Esposito from Island Capital, joined by the fantastic, world-famous EJ Antoni. EJ, how are you today?
Anthony, I am exhausted but happy.
Really? What have you been doing? Why are you so tired this week?
I was going to say the fight is over, but it's really not. It's just the first half of the fight is over, right? You know, we have the best candidate we could possibly have hoped for win the election. He's going to be in the White House in January, and we have a heck of a lot of work cut out for us to try to get this country back on the right track. I mean, we've talked so much in a lot of different episodes about how the American people are genuinely hurting, about frankly how just screwed up our financial markets are right now because of the disastrous policies at the Fed, at the Treasury, you name it. And I mean, all that's gonna be painful to unwind, but I think we got the right man at the helm to help us do it.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I actually worked the polls in Bucks County, PA, where I live on Tuesday. And I stood in line for 7 hours on Friday to early vote so that I could do that on Tuesday.
Yikes.
So, yeah, well, the governor, Governor Shapiro decided they lost the lawsuit earlier in the week for sending us away early illegally and then decided to make it as inefficient as possible. But I will say no one left that line. A lot of patriots. If that was the line in the sand, that was our battle, and no one walked away from it. It's a statement. It's a statement by the country. This country is on the wrong path on every level. I say all the time, there are brush fires everywhere, whether it's what our kids are being taught in kindergarten and first through, higher education, whether it's overseas and our foreign policy, whether it's economic policy, whether it is, we are on fire everywhere. For President Trump to come out and win the popular vote and the electoral vote, he got 292 electoral college votes or about 51% of the popular vote, 71 million votes. I mean, he made a statement. He wins Georgia, he wins North Carolina, he wins Wisconsin, he wins PA. It was an absolute beating. And honestly, the Dems and Kamala Harris deserved exactly what they got. It was a joke of a campaign on their part. It was a coup to begin with. We've had a corpse in the White House for 4 years and the country's spiraling, and he definitely made a statement. So I want to go into a little bit. Let's just review the night and then discuss a little further, and then discuss what it means for policy and for profits and go into the markets. But this is kind of a quick snapshot of what Trump's night looked like. Not a bad night. By the way, this is the only Nazi fascist leader I've ever seen who starts his speeches with a golf swing and a disco dance, just for the record. First time in history. Look, he looks so dangerous. He's just,
I know.
He's a dangerous man.
That's a lousy goose step. I tell you what, that's just, his feet aren't getting high enough, worst fascist ever. Jeez.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to work on that. Now we'll have a little snip, just a picture of, we got an undercover photo of what Kamala Harris looked like as we kind of wound down the night. That's about right. I don't know if there's a fly on the ceiling. I don't know what she's looking at, but totally.
I don't know, but I think wait, hold on. The producer's telling me the audio we're hearing right now is actually her internal monologue. Yes, right. Yep. Okay.
That's her thought process looking at a Venn diagram. That's Kamala Harris's. Let's go into the group. Let's take a look at what the conservative Americans were celebrating, how we felt on them. Absolutely fantastic.
Even the bartenders are getting into it.
I think I see you down. Are you in the middle of that?
Hey, don't X-nay on the bartender bay. You know why they're celebrating? No more tax on tips.
That's right.
The President of the United States.
The U.S. President is Donald Trump.
Officially the only political question Alexa has ever gotten right. So the best for last. Great call, Alexa. Let's take a look at what their night looked like on the Dem side. Oh, that's the GOAT. That's the man. That is the man. Oh, here we go. I feel so bad. I want to feel bad for him, but I don't. I actually, this is so pathetic. And what's really pathetic is I tried to get the least pathetic video to get on the show today. And that is actually the least pathetic one there is. There are people literally melting down about this election. And it would be okay if they were right. But they're so wrong and so ignorant that it's like a big bowl of stupidity, ignorance, and just being pathetic. That's just, I can't explain. I think if I lived my life that way, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It's really, it's pathetic.
It is. And I will say, caution to the viewers, don't watch that clip more than once, because your testosterone will actually start to drop the more you look at people like that. So just careful. Just, we should have had a warning to start the episode here,
God, Walz is happy, man. That's his voter. That is that kid's actually not low testosterone. That's negative testosterone right there. That is a negative testosterone man. That is the guy who will knock on my door if shit hits the fan, apologize quickly, and run inside for protection. And that's the problem I have with that guy.
And all he's got to trade with you is soy milk. Meanwhile, you have like your stash of bullets over here, your stash of gold over here, the canned food, bottled waters in the back.
That's it. He shows up.
Soy milk.
He shows up with a Cabbage Patch doll and a baby Bjorn in front, asking for help. I'm like, come on in. Look at 12 gauge, knucklehead. You've seen Walz do it. You know you could do it.
Yes, he tries to very, very awkwardly with that gun in a motion that I can't do on camera. Yep. Try to load it. I mean, that videos like that just showed you how completely inauthentic the Democrat campaign was this time around. And one thing that was so interesting was the number of iconic photos that Trump generated during the campaign. I mean, think about it. The mug shot went viral, right? The McDonald's shot went viral. The shot went viral. The fight. The garbage truck, that shot went viral. There were literally no viral pictures, moments, videos, anything from the Harris campaign.
No, because you nailed it, first of all, as usual. They're so disingenuous. Everything I've heard and you can't get that picture. You can't get the picture of Trump, which is my personal favorite, hugging the American flag with all sincerity. You can't get that picture if you're a fraud, and they're frauds. Everything I've heard this morning, yesterday, going through the day, is they're blaming everyone else. They're blaming the campaign. They're blaming Biden. But every conversation, it's really interesting to me, is about why they didn't win the vote, why the campaign didn't convince the voters, and what they needed to do to message better. And it's really easy. Your message stinks. It's disingenuous. You could deliver a piece of shit wrapped up in a box or on a paper plate. It's still a piece of shit. And at the end of the day, we're not stupid. You said we were stupid, Kamala. And you guys run your system and try and break this country down as though we're stupid, but we're not. So a piece of shit is a piece of shit. The messaging that they should be working on is a completely new message and direction for the country. Trump ran on not a campaign promise. Trump ran on what he will do to fix this country. He is genuine. He loves this country, and he has gone, and that fed through and showed across the board. And that's, I think, why he got those iconic images. That's why he had those iconic moments. That's why there were 100,000 people outside of Madison Square Garden just wanted to be there, and another 20,000 inside the garden. Oh, and by the way, that weren't bussed in from different parts of the country and paid to be there and had their lunch and hotel rooms paid for. That's the part of the iconic photo that I think is why we're here. We're here because he genuinely was a candidate for the people, for this country, and she's not.
Well said, my man. Well said. Spot on.
So let's roll a little bit here as we pass the GOAT and we go into where she outperformed. Let's not crush her on every level. Let's give her a shot. Let's be fair, right? Fair and equitable. let's take a look at the visuals, because CNN did a good post on where she outperformed Biden from the 2020 election. Let's take a look at that.
Are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
By 3% or more.
So I will. This is such a layup. I talk too much. I'm going to give this one to you.
Well, I think there's a mathematical, or I guess demographic explanation here. She really underperformed, I think, this time around compared to Biden, at least with four key demographic groups. You had blacks, right? Trump made huge inroads there, so she got fewer votes from blacks. She got fewer votes from Hispanics. She got fewer votes from women, and possibly most key, she got fewer votes from 3 a.m. voters. And so you take away all of those literally millions of votes, and all of a sudden you not only get an electoral college landslide where Trump gets more electoral college votes than ever before, but as you said earlier, Anthony, even manages to win the popular vote. I mean, when's the last time a Republican did that? Was it Reagan, I think?
1988.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. So Bush Senior, right? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And one last thing I think we should probably mention, on the politics side here, is the fact that the last two times Trump ran, he had enormous coattails. Even when he allegedly lost in 2020, it was one of the reasons why it was so weird that he lost was the amount of coattails he had. So you had all of these people who voted for down ballot races and voted Republican. This time around, he didn't have anywhere near the coattails he did. In fact, we've seen a couple of places like out west, for example, where, if the Senate candidates do win out there is strictly because of the coattails, because they weren't that popular, right? We did not actually see the kind of red wave that we would anticipate given how well Trump personally did. Mm-hmm. In other words, this increasingly seems like it's not the Republican Party anymore. It is Trump's party, right? The old establishment is dead. Trump killed, frankly, the establishment on both sides of the aisle. And at this point, it really is just kind of morphing into a pro-Trump and anti-Trump political kind of arena today.
That's really interesting. And I agree with you 100%. And I would say that I think that he morphed both parties and he took the Republicans back towards Patriots and America first. And what happened really essentially to the Dems is they ran from him so far that they've become a socialist party. They are no longer we're no longer left, right of center. We're a conservative America first party, and then we're a party of lunacy. And it really is, I mean, honestly, thank God that Trump was spared in Butler, and thank God that Trump won this election, because we're in a hole now, but that party, that far left Democrat party, socialist party, Marxist party, another 4 or 8 years of this, and I don't know that we dig out of that hole. So I think really well said, EJ, really well said. He has been the true definition of a disruptor, and he will go down as one of the greatest men, greatest Americans ever, and I believe one of the greatest presidents ever, and I believe that wholeheartedly. Some of it opinion and some of it fact, but that's my view. That's my view. I think that's a great observation. He has changed the game for sure, which is why the left is so absolutely insane and unhinged. If we look at equities, we had a really nice start of a rally on election day. And we talked about the betting markets previously. The betting markets nailed it. We talked about that the last few shows. Really interesting how we had a late last week flip where Harris pulled ahead. There were two bets made. They were about 30,000 each on Polymarket, and then it kind of fell apart. And we had that weird Iowa poll that showed her winning Iowa, which was wrong by 18 points because he crushed her in Iowa. But whatever. If we pull up the S&P 500 chart, I pulled a chart yesterday morning coming out. So this morning, I apologize. This is a great run for U.S. equities, which we expected, right? So if we rewind back to late October 29 and 30, I had written a note. I write my morning note every morning, and you can see it on islandcapitalinvestments.com or sign up for that delivery, or you can see it on X at CMT_Anthony. But I wrote my morning note, and the idea behind the note was we were way too levered and way too long to not trim exposure across the board in U.S. equities, in risk assets. So I'd called for a break of 5,800 and a test and a test of 5,733 to 5,700 on the index. We actually got that. We were up around 5,850. And we broke 5,800. We broke 5,730. We came down and tested 5,700 for 3 days and then headed into election day. So I was really happy with that trade. That trade worked very well for me, and then pared down exposure because I knew that there would be volatility up or down one way or the other. And it was, for me, it was a known, it was a known unknown. I knew the week election day was coming, but I really didn't know which way we would see the move. So rather than be the wrong side of the trade or spin and try and gain some small exposure in the right direction, I just pared down. The S&P ran about 4% from election day to yesterday. S&P up again today, about 60 bips. I would say that on the index, we're definitely looking at a total of a 5% move from the open on election day until where I see us kind of first target, and that's 6,000 on the S&P. So why is this move happening? Well, it's pretty easy. We have a president stepping in who is pro-business, who wants to reduce taxes. He's pro-growth. He's pro-America. He wants to bring jobs back, real jobs back. It's a solid environment and a solid step for the economy. Never mind the effects as far as opening up energy and infrastructure in the country, securing our border, and reducing this massive spend that we have going on right now to support illegals and to support foreign wars. Everything that you could want in a president to be positive for equities and positive for investments, he is. What do you think of that? You think that I'm on top of the theory behind why? I know the markets and I know what my model is saying as far as where the markets are going, but talk a little bit about his economic policy and why we think this is positive for risk assets.
Well, if you look at, let's start with taxes. It's probably the easiest one to do. If you're going to allow a corporation to keep more of its money, that means it can pay a higher rate of return to shareholders. It can pay more dividends, right? It can pay better workers, which means it can get more productive workers. That's going to help the bottom line. And it can charge lower prices to customers, which means it's going to increase its market share. So anytime you can cut the corporate tax rate, there's not only going to be benefits to shareholders, workers, and customers, but also it's going to help the company's bottom line, and you're going to see that stock do perform better. So I think it makes perfect sense that in anticipation of corporate taxes going down versus going up, which is what they would have done under Harris, I think it makes perfect sense that you see a rally here. And this is kind of actually mirrored, and we talked about this on a couple different episodes, Anthony, how anytime Trump has been ahead in the polls over the course of this calendar year, if you look at the total market rally, it was more than 10x what it was when either of his rivals were ahead in the polls, whether that was Harris or that was Biden. And then you see after the day after he wins, the market jumps 1,300 points. The Dow does, at least. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious stocks are happy about a return of Trump to the White House here. So that's just the tax side. Then if we look at the regulatory side, which maybe even has more of an impact, you see similar effects, right? The process by which that happens is going to be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, you're still cutting a cost to business. That's going to help the bottom line. It's going to have all the effects that I just mentioned. I mean, this really is a win-win. In fact, actually, this is more of a win, again, I think, on the regulatory side than on the tax side, because when you have regulation, there's no actual revenue generation for the government. All you do is you kill certain economic activity. At least on the tax side, although you do kill some economic activity, you get money that you're transferring to the government that the government's going to spend elsewhere. Now, it may waste it, but it's still going to spend it. So not all of that money just kind of vanishes. But on the regulatory side, it does. When the government institutes a regulation and it no longer is profitable for a business to do activities X, Y, and Z, those things just don't happen. That's activity that doesn't occur. Those are people who don't get jobs, don't earn a living, right? Those are customers who don't get a product or service that they wanted. Those are shareholders. They don't see a reduced rate of return. They see no return because the project didn't even happen, et cetera. So I think a much more friendly regulatory environment is going to continue to just keep this market on steroids. And it's not even just a matter of the the price on the price to earning equation, it's not just that the price is going to go up. I think it's that the earnings are going to catch up to price as well. So we've talked before about how some of these PE ratios just make no sense at all. I think they may start to make sense. And it's not because price will come down. I just think it's because earnings are over the next couple of years going to actually catch up.
Absolutely. And that's a good timeline, which leads me to one more closing comment on equities. First one would be, there is a timeline here, right? So the fact that we're in a better environment and earnings are going to increase, this is definitely the right trade. However, be aware that we're in a hole, right? So as we make the turn and President Trump takes office for his second term, there's some work to get done, and and we talked about this before, he could actually enter into a very painful situation because of what's gone on over the past 4 years. And we're just going to have to be patient and have some faith that the policies are turning in the right direction. And this is not a speedboat. It is the largest economy in the world, and it'll be a slow moving tanker heading in the right direction. But there'll be some volatility in prices and in the stock market based on that. Heading in the right direction. This is a parabolic move up. So there'll be some retracement. There'll be some consolidation. We're not going straight, up 20%, but the move here has been the right direction. And then we'll see how we progress through. I don't think that a recession is out of the question just because of the damage that's been done, but I do think that it'll be a shallow recession based on the ideas and the principles and the policies that Trump's going to put in place. I would also say that regulation, taxes, and rates are very important for the small caps and the mid caps. So this is a spot where we could see, and we are seeing, outperformance in the small caps versus the large caps, because they don't have simply put, they just don't have the capital or the resources to deal with all the regulations and the taxes. Their dollars need to go further than the large cap dollars do. So this is an environment where you could see those small caps outperform. So I would watch those as well and watch for opportunities there. I do focus on the S&P 500, but the Russell's definitely getting a little bit of a boost here and could actually outperform, which has not been the case for the past few years in the environment we've been in. If we flip over to gold, and this is something that we've talked about a lot, I have that chart to come up. I still think 3,000 for gold is a legitimate target. Gold did take a pretty good dip. It was down about 5% over the course of the past couple of days. The reasons here are pretty simple. The dollar rallied off of the Trump win, so that's negative for gold. And we've seen rates spiking, which we're going to talk about in a second, which is negative for gold. So not only rates, but real rates have spiked, and that definitely puts some pressure on gold. In addition, and the reason it does is you can get a higher return with a no risk asset in treasuries versus buying gold. So as you see the 10-year yield start to go to 4.5%, 5%, and then you look at the real yield even higher, you could definitely see a reason to be stepping away from gold or lightening up on gold and stepping into treasuries. You also have Hamas today as an example, calling for an end to the war with the Trump win. So geopolitical risk, which also feeds into gold and the appeal of gold, may start to decrease with Trump in office. And we've seen that in his past presidency where the global wars and bad actors kind of stayed in line. We didn't initiate any new wars. We ended wars and there was a cooling down. Russia wasn't invading anyone. Iran was kind of under wraps. So as you see those geopolitical fears fade, you could see some pressure on gold. Now, gold did hit around 2660. It's getting a little bit of a bounce today. I think it continues its march higher. And I think that because I do believe that inflation is still a risk and inflation is still an issue. And gold will become and will remain the hedge to inflation. But gold here at 2660, all that said, do you feel like there's still more of a tailwind or a headwind for gold with the Trump win?
I think there's still a lot of tailwind here. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier about the possibility of recession, everything, which I still think is incredibly likely. And even if people's lives start to improve, you're still going to have at least a technical recession. The reason is because so much of our official government numbers that we get are just absolute garbage. They're being goosed by government spending, by government jobs. I mean, it was just a couple of months ago. I think it was in the month of September, if I remember correctly. There were the actual number of people employed by the government, the employment level jumped by 700,000 in a single month, and that was the only reason the unemployment rate fell that month too. I think it dropped to 4.1, but you get rid of all those government jobs that were added, it jumps to 4.5%. So the jobs numbers are crap. There's an 818,000 loss in jobs, a downward adjustment that has already been estimated but hasn't actually been incorporated into all the monthly numbers. It will in the January data, which we should get either the first or second week of February. So the jobs numbers are going to take a hit. The GDP numbers, we count government spending, which is just ludicrous, but that's how we calculate GDP. So if the government buys something, that gets counted as an increase in economic activity, even though the private sector would have found a much, much more economic use for those resources. So if you start reducing government spending until the private market catches up and basically spends that money in place of government, you end up seeing a hit to GDP. Also, as you reduce transfer payments, so the government takes your money, Anthony, let's say, and gives it to me, and I go out and spend it, that doesn't even get counted as government spending. That gets counted in the consumer spending number, the private spending. And so you start reducing things like welfare payments by reducing waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security or food stamps, whatever the case may be. That will actually show up as a reduction in consumer spending, at least initially. And so, again, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I would not be surprised if the problems that are already baked into the cake, like commercial real estate, like all the unrealized losses in the financial sector, if those things eventually cause an actual recession in 2025, I think that's a very real possibility. I also think the official data, again, quote unquote, will show a technical recession at least sometime in the next year or two. But none of that is to say that people's lives are not going to get demonstrably better. But we also have a ton of deficit spending that is, again, already baked into the cake. Congress has already authorized it to be spent next year, and only the good Lord knows how much the lame duck is going to now add on to that with additional spending, with continuing resolutions and all other kind of financial garbage. And the more they add on, the more inflation they're basically guaranteeing will happen next year, especially with the Fed poised to cut rates yet again. Mm-hmm. And so, I agree with you 100%, Anthony. I think there are still a lot of inflationary and recessionary pressures built into the economy, regardless of President Trump becoming president again next year. And so that is why I'm still a firm believer that, as you said, there's more tailwind behind gold than headwind.
Good segue. Awesome. And good segue into crude. All right. So if we go to crude's been pretty volatile across the board. And it's interesting because crude took a hit with the win, which makes sense, right? So if we're going to unleash American energy, we're going to increase supply in a situation where we still have lackluster demand, true demand here and globally, crude should come in. And remember, when we were back in the Trump administration, we had crude down at 20, right? And then it rallied almost to 120 to the 115 range under Biden. There was actually a time where the curve was negative and you were getting paid to take crude on. As hard as it is to wrap your head around that, that was the supply demand discrepancy at the time under Trump. So we're currently, crude is off about 4%, trying to hold on to that 71, 72 range. It's at 72.06 right now. It's been stuck below 80, and that's been a supply demand issue. But I do see crude as somewhat at risk based on the new administration, only because there will be an increase, which is exactly the point, right? We want energy to come in. We want those prices to fade. Even with a stronger dollar will help. Increased supply will help. I feel like crude here is in a spot where it's not going to break above 80, more likely to break down towards the 60 level, which for me is a longer term support level. That makes sense to me. How do you think crude plays into, let's say I'm right in the scenario and we see crude start to fade. How important is that really for inflation?
It's huge. People, look, this is where academics and I kind of have to part ways in that, my academic brothers, they hold that inflation is strictly because of monetary policy. And that's true in a technical sense, right? The value of the dollar is determined by the supply and demand of dollars. It has nothing to do with energy, actually. But that doesn't mean that you can have things like energy, which affect the price of literally everything. So you drop the price of energy, you will drop prices throughout the entire economy. And the result of that is simply going to be the exact same as if you tightened monetary policy, right? It functions like you are strengthening the dollar. And so to the average American, what you're going to see is not only lower prices at the pump, not only lower prices on your electricity bill, your gas bill, even your water bill, right? Because people, like, believe it or not, most of the cost on your water bill is not the actual water. That's very, very small. The water's free unless you're in Hawaii and you have to get it from distillation. But even then, the ocean is free. You're just heating the water and then cooling it back down. So you're using energy, right? Most of even your water bill is actual energy costs, not water costs. So all of your utilities are going to go down, but then production costs for everything in the economy go down. So you will see lower prices everywhere by increasing the supply of energy. And that really is, I think, the big strategy of the Trump of the second Trump term in terms of reducing prices, not just reducing inflation, reducing how fast prices go up, but reducing the actual prices themselves. And they really don't want to rely too hard on the Fed here to tighten monetary policy, because the short-term effects of that are going to be even more painful than they already have been. Running rates up from essentially 0 to 5% caused a tremendous amount of economic pain. Raising them any more is going to cause more economic pain, but you can kind of square that circle again by just unleashing American energy here. And we should note, although production, at least for oil, is technically at a record high right now, the well count is way down. What we've seen under Biden is that producers have had to make themselves hyper efficient. In other words, they have to get every drop they possibly can out of a single well in order to keep that well profitable at $60 or $70 a barrel, right? Ordinarily, that well would be profitable at 40. Yeah. But they've had to make themselves hyper profitable, and all of the less profitable wells at this point have been shut down. Now they can be reopened if you reduce the regulatory costs. All of a sudden then these wells are profitable at $40 a barrel. And and again, that's where we're trying to get back to now.
Yeah, regulation issue and a permit issue, right? Like they'll issue the leases for the land, but then they won't give the permit to drill and to drill baby drill. So this reduction in regulation, a real factor here in trying to get us back on track. Let's go to the 10-year yield now, and then I want to roll into, because we do have Mr. Powell speaking this afternoon on a rate decision. The 10-year yield is up about 25% currently, and over the past, so that's since like September, and then we saw a nice rally, almost a 5% rally in that 10-year yield coming out of the election. So that's bringing us up to around the 4.5 level, 4.5% on the 10-year. So essentially what happens is we have the market, and we've used this terminology before, but the market is more powerful than the government. The market is more powerful than the Fed. And what the market is saying to the Fed is rates are not coming in. They're actually going to go up. So what they're doing is we're net sellers on balance of debt, and we have 28 trillion in U.S. Treasury debt, 28 trillion that we've borrowed as a nation outstanding. They're selling that debt down. As they sell the bonds down, they're raising the yield or rates on those bonds, and that's putting upward pressure on rates and on yields. That makes perfect sense. Now, if we look at deficit and then we look at the Fed, I ask you, and we can roll into this conversation, how does the Trump win put pressure on Powell? What does the Fed do now? They had a politicized 50 basis point cut at the last meeting, which probably, well, we can argue it was or was not the right move, but it's hard to say it wasn't political. Yeah. We have rates rallying now, Jerome Powell trying to cut rates, and our deficit's growing. How does this affect Powell? How does this affect the Fed and decisions today and then moving forward?
Well, I think this is just further evidence of the fact that they were way too late to raise rates, and there was no reason for them to start cutting rates other than what you just said, Anthony, which was politics. I mean, at the end of the day, Powell was basically looking at two people, two competing candidates for the job, one of whom wanted him to lose his job, and the other one said, no, you can keep your job. So I think it's pretty, it's pretty cut and dry that he wanted the Democrat to win here, despite the fact that Trump was the one who appointed him as Fed chair to begin with. Didn't originally appoint him to the Fed. That was Obama. But, Trump was the one who elevated him to the chair. All that being said, I mean, at this point, now all of a sudden the election's behind us. They don't have the same incentive to do these jumbo rate cuts anymore of 50 basis points at a time. So I would not be surprised if we see either a 25 cut or even that they hold steady right now. Again, their incentive isn't to provide loose monetary policy anymore. All of a sudden, it's to once again pay attention to inflation, which is still much too high, and inflation expectations, which are still much too high. We are not back to the 2% target. We're not even trending to the 2% target right now. So again, at this point, I'm going to expect, if not tighter monetary policy from here on out, that the loosening is reined in.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I think he's in a spot today where he's going to cut 25 bips. There's the market expectations, 93% of a 25 basis point cut. And after cutting 50 last time, for him to come out and not cut, I mean, literally cut 50 heading into the election, Dems lose, and now all of a sudden I don't want to cut at all. So I think 25 bips today is kind of done. But I agree with you 100%. Moving forward, the expectations, and I'll watch this, the expectations of cuts moving forward, I would imagine are going to drop, where rates may not go back up, or the Fed funds rate may not go back up, or they may not tighten. But that cutting process, I'm going to say, has been put kind of on pause for now, or the expectations are going to be much lower that we will see that. And again, he's put himself in a corner. I think you're 100% right. They were late to raise. They were too aggressive in cutting. He's missing the mark, and policy overall is inflationary. So for them to start to cut rates here just didn't make sense. I think he's kind of stuck in a spot where he's got a save face today, but moving forward, it's going to slow down, or he's just going to pause.
Right. And, and this goes back to what we were saying about gold, why 3,000 still seems like a really realistic price target. It has to do with how inflationary, not only the monetary side is, but the fiscal side has been and is continuing to be right now. I mean, Treasury just announced they're going to borrow, over $800 billion just in the first quarter of next year. Now, some of that is because Yellen is purposely reducing borrowing right now in the fourth quarter and drawing down Treasury's cash balance. So she's going to have to make up for all of that next quarter by increasing borrowing even more. So it's not as if we're going to borrow $800 billion every quarter from then on out, but it's still a really bad sign. And it still points to, again, just how much inflationary pressure is already, kind of baked into the cake at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would argue that the borrowing against the U.S. citizen to fund foreign countries' foreign wars and hurt us. It's a double whammy, right? You're taking our tax dollars and giving them away, and that's feeding inflation and how difficult it is to manage the day-to-day here. It's almost like the government walking into a store, or me walking in a store with a credit card and putting $100,000 on the card, but buying stuff for everybody there that's going to walk away and leave, and now I'm stuck with the bill. And me being stuck with the bill, meaning the U.S. citizen, we're stuck with the bill. I definitely think it's going to be interesting moving forward. We shall see. I do appreciate the conversation today, EJ. I think it's a great day. I think it was a great week for America. I look forward to kind of getting out of the hole we're in and moving forward. Here we go. And I appreciate the conversation, my man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. As always, Anthony, it's a pleasure.